Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's up? It is Dave, Duncan, and Kyle. He's up there from Metal Epidemic.
So kind of almost a bit of kind of method pause acting there. It's like it's a little bit of Captain Kirk in there. It's like it's Dave, Duncan, and Kyle. There he's there.
We're back for another album review. And for this review, Duncan, Kyle, and I have been checking out the new album from Canadian hardcore punk band Comeback Kid. The band's new album, Heavy Steps, will be released on January 21st on Nuclear Blast Records.
When did they sign to Nuclear Blast? Is this a new thing?
Mm-hmm. No.
The previous one?
Previous one was on Nuclear Blast, I'm sure. They were on... I think they were on. Was it Victory Records? They were on for a while.
Because that's how I clearly have missed an album because I could not remember them being on Nuclear Blast, and I know, Dave, I rectified it. Jesus Christ! Jeez, look at his face. No, I heard the previous album. It's all you talked about when it came out.
Cool.
Well, I can bring up the chat logs if you want. Literally all you fucking spoke about for about 2 months.
Actually, let's do that.
So I have checked it out. I just couldn't remember.
Okay.
Them signing with Nuclear Blast. It feels like an interesting choice, but having seen their roster recently is actually it's becoming an interesting label, Dave.
It is. Comeback Kid. They have been on the go since 2002, and Heavy Steps were the band's 7th album and their 2nd album on Nuclear Blast Records. Returning to their roots, literally, by recording the album in Winnipeg and co-producing with John Paul Peters, who has worked with the Cancer Bats and Propaganda, as well as a collaboration with prominent mixer Will Putney.
Oh, Jesus.
Will Putney, who's worked with Knocked Loose and Every Time I Die. Yep. Heavy Steps is no longer a prerequisite to realising Comeback Kid's influence on modern punk, but a delivery of pure anthemic chaos, sheer speed and force. It is a statement of intent. Okay, gentlemen, so
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
Tell you what, 7 albums in 20 years is the right rate to release albums by.
Yeah. Not if you're a punk band, it's not. Like, if you're a punk band, you should have like more albums than years. We've been together for 7 years. We've released 14 albums, of which 7 are bootlegs and 9 are the math's all wrong because we don't even know. You know what I mean? It's like
I've got 4 in a back pocket that are splits.
It's the kind of thing that I've always really liked about them, though. Before we start talking about the album, is they do feel like it's never just right, we need to strike now. It kind of feels like they're releasing albums because they have something to say, as opposed to because the label's like TikTok, TikTok. You know what I mean? It's like, it's endearing quality in a band.
Absolutely. I agree. This album was always going to be a slightly difficult one for me, because I've been a fan of these guys for a long.
Well, you just decided that. Like, I've been a fan of you for 20 years now. It's the 7th album. That is about time.
When they said they went back to Winnipeg, and Dave was like, "This bridge is burned."
I've been following the band for about 15 years. I wasn't there right from the beginning. Close enough. Their last album, 2017's Outsider.
It's safe to say that Dave may have enjoyed a track or 2 on the album, and he didn't speak about it much.
My favourite release by Comeback Kid, Outsider from 2017. It sat at the top of my end of year list in 2017.
Yep.
Perfect. It's just the perfect balance of aggression and catchy as hell choruses. Yep. It is anthemic, in a word. And for me, it was the best Comeback Kid have ever sounded. So, they didn't know it, but there was a lot of pressure on them for this album.
They didn't know, but this reviewer had applied so much pressure that it was like a python gripped round their cock.
Yeah. I was a little bit kind of tentative about hitting the play button on Heavy Steps, because to outdo Outsider was going to be like a very tall order.
Had you listened to the single with Big Joe first?
Yes, I had. Well,
yeah, right. So that was an easing in. That was how they get you in, though. Dave's like that. I don't know if they can do it. They're like that. Guest appearance by goes here, and you're like, all right. I'm gonna hit play. Don't want it, guys.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna hit play.
I liked what I'd heard from the singles. But that didn't mean that the rest of the album was going to sound the same or as good.
Burned before.
Yes, we have.
We call that spirit box syndrome.
Yeah. And I suppose like the first part of the album, obviously I enjoyed it because the 3 singles they released are tracks 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah.
Track 4 being Crossed, featuring Joe from Gojira. Which, that was pretty cool to hear. Like, I saw it obviously on the kind of email that we had round when we did a reaction to one of their tracks a while ago.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the track listen, Joe is guesting on the album.
It's a weird thing as well, because, like, I don't know, you always just assume vocalists stay in their lane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like that time when you bought the Primitive album, and they're like, yeah, this track has Max Cavalera and Corey Taylor, and you're like, of course it fucking does, because of course it fucking does. Yeah. You know, like, as you get, it seemed like on paper it seemed like a bizarre choice to me until I listened to it, and I was like, oh no, that actually surprisingly makes a lot of sense. So much so that I think if Joe wanted to start a little hardcore punk project out there, Dave,
I'd be down. Yeah, the
if he needs a bassist, hi Joe, I'm here.
This is not an audition.
Not yet, but now he knows I'm interested.
Pick your bass away. It's no time or the place.
It just appears. It's always been here, guys. So you heard it, you liked it, you had the singles, you liked the singles.
The addition of the kind of that Gojira type guitar leads, the melody, the big vocals from Joe, alongside the kind of hardcore rhythms and characteristics. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, like yourself. Like, looking at it on paper, I was like, ooh, how's that going to work? But actually, the blend of styles worked really well. And as a track, it does lean more on the groovier side of things, unsurprisingly, which was cool as well, because it added a little bit more variation. It kept the album interesting rhythmically.
My favourite bit in the track is when you get dum. The rest of the guys are like, we're not doing that, Joe. Come on.
Punch your whammy away.
Come on, have a wee laugh.
I don't know if it was just me, but Joe does sound more like Max Cavalera than he does Joe DePlante on that track.
Yeah. I think he's just channeling a different vocal register.
Could be.
I think. Don't tell me he's turning it. Don't you do this to me, Dave Buchanan. Don't on this recording say, do you not think Joe's becoming a bit... Have you seen his dreadlocks recently? Like, Joe's hair's beautiful. Back off.
Yeah. Every second word's motherfucker.
And tribe.
Back the fuck up. The rest of this album is very
French.
Is very consistent. Just like Outsider, Comeback Kid, they very rarely drop the ball. Like, they've gotten to a point in their career where they are no longer questioning what makes a good arrangement or what makes a track have a great chorus. They've got that down so well now that it never sounds like they're unsure if something is going to work or not. They sound very confident in their ability on this album, and that came across massively on this album. It's a very, very tight release. Everything sounds very concise. The slick, kind of punchy production by John Paul Peters and Will Putney definitely emphasises that. What I would say is it does sound very produced, even like much more than Outsider did. The drums in particular on Heavy Steps are, for me, a little bit too edited, just a wee bit.
What the fuck is going on here? Right, did I just walk into like a Twilight Zone episode or something? Like, you guys used the Brundlefly machine and swapped.
I don't know if it was because I listened to Outsider again just before I listened to this album, and the drums are much more natural overall on the album. You can hear the little kind of nuances in the snare. The bass drum just sounds like they've chucked a mic in it and just went with it.
yeah.
And I like, as a hardcore listener, I do prefer these albums that have got a little bit more grit and a little bit more an untidy sound. If I'm honest,
the French say "au naturel."
Au natural is exactly what I'm talking about, Duncan.
There you go.
I think hardcore sounds best when it's under-treated, left a little, rough around the edges. That might not bother other people. I'm sure some will quite like the more polished sound they went for in Heavy Steps, but it was one thing that did kind of stick out a little bit on me. It does sound very, very polished and kind of clinical, but song-wise, this is, again, another very strong album from Comeback Kid. They've got the grooves, they've got the beatdowns, they've got the high energy, the big choruses. Are they as good as Outsider?
See how Dave's done this? Dave has now set up a death match that no one wanted to love it.
I don't think they're quite as infectious, if I'm honest. I think Outsider has a wider range of styles. That album had moments where they almost went into like pop punk, but like not enough for it to piss off fans. And I think they also push a kind of slightly heavier side on that album as well. My voice is starting to go again. Heavy Steps has kind of pulled that in somewhat. They don't quite push it as far on this one in either direction. It stays more around the kind of middle. Every so often they'll maybe nudge it slightly, lighter on like Standstill, or a little bit heavier on like Crossed or True to Form. But even with those kind of like small gripes I have, still a great listen. Like, as I said, the quality is still there. It's only 32 minutes, so it doesn't overstay its welcome at all. Highlights for me, I loved Face the Fire, which is a real kind of Wilhelm scream type ferocity to it. But I liked that they didn't put the breakdown right at the end of the track. They did it, and then they kind of brought the energy back up and went out on a high. I loved Everything Relates, which features JJ from These Nuts and I Killed the Prom Queen. Amazing chorus, and the guitar work really kind of elevates the size of the track. And I really liked the kind of older, more traditional style riffs on True to Form. That was a really cool throwback as well. I enjoyed that. This is another great album to add to their catalogue. I'm sure if you are a fan of the band, then this will definitely fill that kind of Comeback Kid filled hole that you've had in your life for the last 4 or 5 years. Not a disappointment at all. I really enjoyed this. It's a shame that obviously their UK tour has just been cancelled, which is
along with everyone else's, Dave.
Yep, true.
Get used to
a shame. I'd love to see this stuff live, and just feel it au natural and not in a kind of live setting. But I'll need to wait a bit longer for that.
Dave naked in a mosh pit.
Yes.
Rocking the one button suit.
How about you guys? How did you go on with this? I don't know how you feel about Comeback Kid at all. Duncan, what about you? What do you think of this one?
Oh, you know that I like them because, like I said before, you've fucking forced upon. It is kind of like not without consent, Dave. He's like, slides it into my DMs. You know what I mean? Roughly. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of time for Comeback Kid. I got, like, if you got into them, if you're claiming getting into them not at the start is like by 5 years, I don't think I got into them until later than that. I think we had stopped being a band. So that's what, 2009, 2010, by the time Comeback Kid started to become like something I was aware of. Mostly pushed by a mutual acquaintance of ours, Graham Humphrey, who is a huge Comeback Kid fan. Absolutely fucking loves them, which is surprise no one if you ever meet this guy. That kind of... He is the Comeback Kid. Don't know what that means, but I'm just... And he lives in Canada now. Oh my...
He does.
Full circle.
Yep.
It's the circle. So yeah, I mean, like, I remember you like losing your shit over the Outsider, and I remember checking it out, and I didn't lose my shit over it. I thought it was a really good album. It was my album of the year then, but I could hear very clearly why. Like, if I'd heard that album independent of you, I would have sent you a message saying, this album is a Dave album. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I was curious about this one, maybe not on the level that you were, where you were trepidatious about hitting a play button because of the quality of the previous one. Mostly because, one, I had Nuclear Blast against it. I wasn't aware the previous album was a Nuclear Blast. So that to me was like, oh, that seems like a weird bit for a label. But then, like we said, if you go through their roster over the last year, it's worth the albums. They've really diversified in a really interesting way. I think they've got some incredible bands on their roster at the moment. But then I'd heard the single. I'd heard about, like, because your frontman's going to be, playing with them, and I was just like, this is all wrong. And then I listened to it, and I was like, actually, this is great. I love this. Like, it made me wonder though if what they were looking for was a heavier sounding album. They moved to a heavier label, and then the first track I hear is with arguably the frontman of arguably the biggest metal band on the planet at the moment. So I was kind of like, let's see where we go. And I would say thankfully they didn't go down that road. That kind of pleased me. The drum sound didn't really bother me. I'll be honest with you, I can't say I was paying so much attention to the previous album's drums or the drum sound and the ones before. I don't tend to scrutinise this sort of music on that level, and that's not being dismissive. I just don't. It's not something that my ear goes to. Comeback Kid for me is its kind of knockout power has always existed in really, really, really good riffs and amazing vocals. And like I've always loved his vocal style, and it's here. I mean, you would never know this guy was this far in with a band if you didn't at the same time. I think you answered the question that I was going to raise, where I was like that. Like, how could they be so far into their career and sound, still so like energetic? I think part of that is the fact that they haven't released as many albums as other bands, so it's never got to the point where it feels tired, and as a result, I don't think they've ever had to be in a position where they have to constantly outdo themselves in such a short time frame. And it kind of shows here. This one felt at times maybe not as experimental as the previous album, but at the same time, it did feel like there's more confidence on this album, I feel, overall in the core sound. But as a result of that, they don't take what I would class as risks as much as they have on previous ones. It feels like the core is perfect now, and they'll add little elements in. They can throw some throwback stuff in there, but for the most part, it sticks to that all the way through. It's catchy as fuck. I mean, it still is an incredibly catchy album. It flies through. I mean, you could be forgiven for thinking this was an EP in terms of your attention when listening to it. It just feels like it's over really, 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 really fast. Very much like yourself, True to Form is like one of those standout tracks because it's the one that, and it fits really, really well on the album, but it's the one that kind of feels like there's a winking nod to the old crew up the back, and I kind of love that about it. Very much like yourself, the guest appearance of JJ, who's a great vocalist. I love his stuff, but him joining in is great as well. I don't know, I think like in terms of, I think this is a really, 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 really good album. I think it's only going to continue perpetuating the popularity of Comeback Kid. I don't think there's one thing on here that would turn off a Comeback Kid fan. I think, if anything, like you say, it just gives you a bunch of new songs you can't wait to see in the pit. And that's the beauty of it. And it doesn't feel like at any point they're being complacent. This doesn't feel like this is the album release so we can go on tour. This kind of feels like, they've wanted to do something together. This far into their career, do they need to be like kind of pushing the boat and being experimental? Probably not. It's just a shame that some of that stuff that was on the previous album that kind of, to me, felt like, all right, you're starting to play with ideas that are going to go into the evolution of the sound. Feel like they've kind of got that out of their system and been like, well, we did it. It was fun on that track. We're just now going to kind of leave it where it is. I mean, I will be surprised. I will be very surprised if, and I'm not saying I'm going to have it there, but I'm going to be very surprised if this album doesn't feature on end of year lists. It kind of has that kind of feel of, this is almost a shoe-in for like a top 20 list. You could put in Comeback Kid. I'm not saying it would for me. Like I say, I like them. I've always liked them as long as I've been listening to them. And this is on the better end of the spectrum of stuff they've put out. But I wouldn't go as far as to say I love the album. I think there's a lot in here. I will play I'll play this to death though. I know that because it's an easy listen. It's an easy listen. You can sing along to the choruses. You can get angsty and aggressive, and in a fun way, in a safe way, Kyle. But, you know, at no point was I like that, right, well, this is the album of their career, if you know what I mean. But then I'm also thinking, come back, kid, 20 years, are they trying to do that? Or are they just trying to make the album that makes them feel best about themselves? And if that is the case, and this is the sound, once again, that they want to go down, I'm happy with that. If the next 5 Comeback Kid albums sound like this, then they're putting out great quality albums. I feel there's a missed opportunity to build on some of... And it's not as if it's a dramatically different sounding album outside. It's just it has a couple of things in it that made it a slightly more interesting listen to me. Yeah, I'll put it that way. But yeah, it's a cool album, and it's going to do gangbusters for them. And like yourself, I think they'd be a ton of fun to see live, and we'll just have to wait. They'll be over. There's no way they're not coming over. It's just they're not coming over when they said they were. Yeah. Kyle.
Hi. Yeah, I heard this album. It's got some music in it.
What did you think of it?
Actually, being not such a huge hardcore fan, or not saying I'm not a fan of it, I just don't pay attention to it that much, but this is some of the best hardcore I've ever heard. I've not been a Comeback Kid fan. I've heard of them, of course, in conversation passing by here and there, but not really gotten into them. But this is, it's a good hardcore album. I mean, it gets a bit samey by the end for me, but that's because that's what hardcore is to me. It's like you got your gang vocals and your song choruses and your big anthemic bits and then your heavy bits, and it's got cool riffs as fuck and all that stuff. But yeah, to me, I mean, it was a boon that it was such a short album because I could enjoy it. It didn't get too samey for too long, so I was like, okay, it didn't outstay. It was welcome. It was great. But I might go back and check out that previous album because he said that's a bit more, a bit more varied.
Dave needs to go, honestly. I love the fact that Dave's like that. I went back and listened to The Outsider. Like, he hadn't been listening to it the day before anyway. Right, this guy here, this cunt. Well, good on you, huh?
So good.
If you say that one's more varied, I'll definitely check that one out. I'd be interested to hear more
stress
varied.
When we say varied, it's not as if they break out like Baroque style music in the middle.
No, of course not.
It's not that sort of stuff. It's just it feels like there's a bit more. I don't know. It feels like they take more risks. It's a weird thing to describe. It just feels like there's. It feels like nothing was off the table when they were writing that album. But whilst listening to this album, it feels like very much like everyone's agreed this is the core, and we don't deviate from the core.
And that's what I'd be interested in hearing because hardcore is hardcore, and this is more hardcore, but it's really good hardcore. But I'd be interested in hearing something a bit more experimental.
Yeah, I think the risks they took with that last album made it more memorable. I think the tracks were way more distinctive than they are here. They're great tracks here, but when I listened back to Outsider, I was like, oh yes, this track, and the next one, oh yes, love this chorus. Like I knew them straight away. But
that's what happened when you listen to an album 150 times, Dave.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah. That's fair.
Absolutely loved Crossed. Not gonna lie, that is the best song on the album for me. It's like huge surprise. Massive Gojira fan thinks the Gojira song is the best song on this band's album. But yeah, there was a bit. I mean, the production let it down too. I mean, like Dave said, there was a bit too much. I mean, I noticed it was like it's not the worst I've ever heard, honestly, and it's a bit too far. It's very edited and stuff. But other than that, I love the way it starts with a bass tone. It just fucking, I kicked my ass. And I loved it straight away. So that's really good. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Nice.
All in all.
Nice. Okay, so what we're thinking rating-wise for Heavy Steps? I mean, it's a very enjoyable album. The quality is very consistent. I just feel that previous album just set the bar so high that when I came to listen to this, it just never quite got there. The tracks are good, but not quite as infectious and memorable as they are on Outsider for me. Enjoyable album. I'd probably go in at a 4 out of 5 for Heavy Steps. Duncan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think 4 is the right answer. Outsider to me is a 4.5 album. I think this is near it, but it's not quite there. It's another album, like I say, I will return to loads this year because it's just that it's an easy listen. There's no, you don't have to, get yourself in a headspace about you. You can put this on and just sit back, enjoy yourself, and then it's done. So 4 out of 5 from me.
Cool. And Kyle?
Yeah, I'll come in at a 4 out of 5 as well.
Nice.
Syncing up.
Awesome. So this one will drop on January 21st on Nuclear Blast Records. The album is called Heavy Steps. I will put links below to their Facebook and to the pre-order for the album. Check it out. Let us know what you think. If you've heard any of the tracks, once you've heard the album, stick some comments in below. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with a new review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Heavy steps on hollow ground. Testing of the rest of men taken look. It's not the first. Are you sure it's a pattern? Say to settle down. I'm faded. Spit on